Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host for tonight. I'm the Director of Programs with NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness of North Carolina. I'm glad you're here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and building community on the topic of mental health. Our guest tonight is Timothy Dreby. He is an award-winning author, advocate, and therapist in Oakland, California. Tim came to my attention when we had a disagreement on Facebook, believe it or not. Like many others, actually, he has a different view of mental health and mental illness than the official NAMI standard. He wrote in his blog about not being so fond of the medical model, also known as the disease model of mental health challenges. And a lot of folks who live with mental health challenges don't warm up to that language. You know, it seems kind of not super strength-based or a little bit negative. I hear the term neurodiversity being used more and more. Anywho, I responded to the blog with, well, hey, you know, I kind of love NAMI. I work there. I also have mental health challenges and blah, blah, blah. And so this, this could have escalated into a social media road rage incident, but it did not, right? Tim and I are role models. So we had a civilized exchange, which led to a Zoom discussion, which led to me reading his memoir, which I love. And here he is tonight. So we're going to be talking with Tim in just a moment. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. About halfway through, we'll show our video of the week, and then we'll spend time answering questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience. Now, a quick word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We appreciate their guidance and support so very much. Okay, now without further ado, Tim Dreby is here with us, pen name Clyde Dee. He's the award-winning author of Fighting for Freedom in America, Memoir of a Schizophrenia, and Other Mainstream Cultural Delusions. Interesting title. He has a practice in Oakland, California, as I mentioned, and there are lots of cool things to check out on his webpage, timdreby.com. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And so we'll jump right in. For those of us who haven't read your book, tell us your story in a nutshell.
Well, it starts when I first moved to Seattle, which was back in 1990. I took a kind of a step down job so that I could move out west. And in the early days in Seattle, they had the WTO protest. And I had gotten kind of caught up in that, and it had me, I was really astounded that things were, things as I saw them were not what was on the TV. And not long after that, I took a job in a Section 8 housing authority complex that was rife with crime. It was called the Hotel of Horrors in the local media. And I kind of went in there passionately thinking that I could make a difference. Like I've always tried to socially make a difference. And I thought this was my real chance to roll up my fist. And the work fit me in a lot of ways. But what happened was I was pretty much denying that what I was seeing was traumatizing me. And I was also denying that I was a little traumatized by what happened in the WTO protest. I was also on antipsychotics, which I had been on for about 7 or 8 years. And I never had a problem with psychosis, but they put me on them anyway. And I agreed to take them, and I had a therapist who I kind of did what I was supposed to do with, but I didn't think for myself very much. And what happened was, as things heated up in the building, and there were some deaths, and there was a lot of crime. And I was trying to figure out, like, how is this possible? You know, how is such danger and this reality possible when, you know, I kind of grew up in much more sheltered of a situation. Even though I lived in Camden, New Jersey, I'd never been so close to politics where people were getting hurt so much. And yeah, so I went off my antipsychotics, and I had somebody at the project tell me, you know, you do really good work here. Everybody really likes you here, but we had somebody who did this before once, and they ended up coming in having to live with us. And so that kind of scared me, and I started to get scared. And within 4 days, I was picked up in a mountain pass in Butte, Montana, on my way to Butte, Montana, walking. And it's a long story, but I ended up hospitalized for 3 months in Montana State Hospital. And then I caught a Greyhound and tried to start over again in California, in Fresno. And eventually, to reconnect with family, I had to move to the Bay Area, take a job on the outskirts of the Bay Area, well, a house on the outskirts of the Bay Area, and commute into a Italian delicatessen. And my major delusion was that my family was an Irish mafia family. So it kind of was very confusing and hard to figure out what was really going on in that deli. And it was a hard job to hold. It took me about 10 to 12 months to get out of there and get a better job. And I learned a lot in the process. And that's the main gist of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, so you went into the Seattle Hotel of Horrors, and you were doing some peaceful protesting at the World Trade Organization conference, and you were bear sprayed or pepper sprayed, and physically, you know, so they were physically aggressive with you. So there was a lot of disillusionment going on in your life at that time, and a lot of stress with that job in a kind of a violent, tough environment. That does sound like an awful lot of pressure.
Yeah, it was. And I think everybody else said they would never go in there and they would never do what I did. And I was like the first to jump in line. So, but I didn't realize, I think coming off the medication, I didn't realize I came off the medication while I was in the project to try to figure out what was really going on, because I didn't feel safe not knowing, not being alert. And I found myself much more alert, and I found myself much more intuitive, and I found myself, when I was alert and intuitive, to be correct an awful lot of the time. And I think that's what started me into believing alternate theories, alternate conspiracies, alternate kind of explanations for what was going on, and not
Yeah,
taking that value.
it does sound very confusing, because there was some corruption. There were things, it sounded like, from reading the book, that would reinforce a conspiracy theory kind of outlook. And that's my next question in a way. Well, fast forwarding a little bit, because I think you went in that direction. Most of your book reads like a real-time journal. It's told in your voice when you're really struggling. And I got the feeling you were probably having some delusions, and you were also encountering some very real corruption and danger. Do you ever look back and wonder what was real?
Yes, of course I do. And I think that learning to look back, or learning to get out of the situation, I had to learn to take in the information and sit on it, kind of like with uber amounts of EQ. And it's funny that in many ways, it's reinforced dissociating a little bit, like not not acting as though the stuff is real, waiting and seeing and letting time and things like, I believe, spirit or God or whatever you want to call it, unveil what the reality is, and not acting as though you know ahead of time. And that is something that I really have to do all the time. And I think in rewriting my book and in daily life, I think reflecting on this stuff gets me closer to a reality that that I can say is my reality, and it's not absolute truth, but I feel like it's my truth, and in time, I think things get revealed to me, and I kind of have learned to like that process.
Well, that's certainly encouraging to hear. I have to confess, as I was reading, there were times when I felt like, well, I want to know exactly what this was and what that was and all these loose ends. But then it occurred to me midway through, well, that's life. We don't get to know. We don't get every loose end tied up. We don't get to know what we don't know, what we're not entitled to know. So yeah, that was an insight that I gleaned from it. What's the most important takeaway that you want people to get from the book?
Well, I want people to know that even when things are really feeling like they're impossible to overcome, that they are possible to overcome, that recovery is possible and recovery is real. And I also want people to consider that approaching somebody and finding out what their experiences are is really important, and supporting them with their experiences, regardless of what mainstream reality says is real, is a route to help them get back into a kind of reality situation where they can navigate and to be supportive of what's being done and what the person is doing on their behalf, and encouraging them to do more of it. I think that is also, as the title suggests, I like to consider a different definition of what psychosis is. I'd like that to be considered. I'd like the textbooks to say things different, because the way I was taught about what schizophrenia was very much in my mind. And when it was happening to me, there was no way I was going to admit that was going on, because it didn't depict what I thought schizophrenia was. And I think when we get those kinds of internalized definitions, that's a lot of the reason why we get people who don't want to admit to it or can't admit to it, or it's because their first definition of what was going on was so misunderstood. And so I think having an open dialogue about what really is the definition and what's really going on in those things is something the public needs to know more about, personally. I'd like that.
Yeah, I like that mission. And I think the way that we're taught about mental health, if we're taught about mental health, it is kind of stigmatizing some of the language. And so, yeah, then, I mean, for me, when I was struggling, the last thing I wanted to do was admit that maybe I was having a mental health problem. I joined Toastmasters, and I jogged, and I meditated, and I took St. John's Wort. I did everything I could to avoid actual mental health treatment. But that's what I needed.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. No matter how bad you felt or how bad the last job was, you always were out there getting a job. Was that part of your recovery?
Yes, that was so important to me. And it comes from how I learned to survive with mental health struggles. I think my first mental health struggle was when I was 15. I got really bad case of insomnia, and I wasn't sleeping more than 3 hours a night for like a year. And it was a tough year. And at the end of the year, my dad had me come up and work with him in some property that he owned up in upstate New York. And we worked like 16-hour days. And after a 16-hour day of working with my dad, I did sleep. And that got me back on track. And then I did an Outward Bound program. And in Outward Bound, I also started to sleep. So I kind of learned that working was important to getting out of those funks that I was in and those challenges. And also when I was in college and I had a hospitalization, they put me in a really, how would you say, institutionalized program where I was supposed to just stay, and I chose instead to go get two holiday cashier jobs instead, and that kept me out of going on SSI and getting into the mental health system back then. So I was very determined that working was something that I could do, and that because of these challenges, it didn't mean I couldn't work. And I was hell bent on proving that. And I think that's part of how I got through. So working was very important.
Yeah, that resonated with me a lot. For me, work was always structure. It was always meaning, esteem, things I really wasn't getting in other areas of life at times. So I support that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the IPS model out of Dartmouth, it very much supports that too, that learning social skills when you're in a state hospital with people screaming and you carrying on and all this stuff, you don't learn good social skills there. But when you're having to work with other people, that's when you have to really build those social skills. And social skills, when you're in a crisis, is much harder to do than they usually are. I've never been great at them, but I was especially not good at them when I was in crisis. So I needed to work on those social skills, and work was the best place to do that. And I think, I see people in the system getting into groups and working on their social skills, and that's really heartening. And if they're in a hospital though, where everybody's in crisis, they can't do that so well. So that's been my experience, at least what I've observed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You want something that'll point towards community inclusion and getting more into the mainstream just so they can feel a part of. And that's another important piece for most of us.
Yeah.
Righty. So the title of your book references mainstream cultural delusions. I found that really thought-provoking because we all apply a certain judgmental lens if a speaker has mental health challenges or neurodiversity, if you prefer. But there are delusions that we share as a society. And honestly, every time I tried to think of an example, politics came to mind, and I didn't want to go there. But, the emperor's new clothes is one example. Or maybe you live in a community or family where everyone always says, no, it's a great day. It's a beautiful, things are always good. And they never acknowledge, when you're struggling. There are, you could call them delusions that groups of people share. What did you mean by cultural delusions? What specifically were you thinking of?
I was thinking of a lot of it had to do with what schizophrenia was or what mental health struggles were. I think I was thinking of things like the twin studies that I'd read in college and the genetic disposition. But I think many people, I'm not arguing that genetics may not play a part, but I think a lot of people use that as in a eugenics way, that some genes are flawed. For example, I would be happy to say that I have some spiritual genes in me, but to say that I have some kind of illness that's going to make me progressively worse over time for the rest of my life, that's not going to work that's not going to help me out. That's not going to make me feel better. So I think some of the cultural delusions about, and then there are cultural delusions that we have as a society that on both sides of either politics, when you have, especially now, a society that's so divided, you've got one bubble here and one bubble here, and they're both very different and opposing each other. And reality, some, you know, both sides are saying the other is distorting reality. So it's very hard to know what is real. And we get our material from news and media and stuff like that. But there's lots of places to get our material from, and some of us get it from Spirit and other places. So yeah, cultural delusions can mean a lot of things.
Mhm. It's a good point about people living in their own bubbles or their own silos. And there's been a lot of news coverage about how if you get focused on YouTube, on a certain type of YouTube video that talks about a conspiracy pointed in a certain direction, you'll get more and more offerings along those lines from YouTube because they want you to stay engaged with their platform and it makes them more money. Same with other social media. So yeah, how do we pull people back in and start looking for common ground?
Yes, yes. And I think common ground comes in community and in people sharing their stories and sharing their beliefs. And I think what often happens in when people have psychosis or a break from reality is that those realities aren't allowed to be seen or shared. Like if you're in a group on a outpatient unit and you start to share about your psychosis, you're going to get shut down. I've seen it happen to me in times. And it's very hard to be curious and get the stories out. But when you have a place where you can get the stories out and people can compare and contrast, they start to realize they're not alone. And the experience that I had through my journey was that I was extremely alone. I thought I was the only person this was happening to. And I wouldn't believe that this could have happened to anybody else. And the fact of the matter is, when you're hearing and you see right in front of you that it's happening to other people, it is such an eye-opening experience for you. It just opens up the possibilities, and and you want to collaborate, you want to connect. For me, it was really what I needed to face what had happened to me.
Mhm.
So I found those groups very helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'll bet. And I think I had a similar feeling when I started working in the mental health arena. My background was communications and journalism. But when I sort of learned that there's a recovery movement, almost a civil rights type movement around mental health, then I felt like maybe my suffering can have meaning and maybe I'm part of a bigger whole, part of a group that I would feel good about, in fact, and not self-stigmatizing so much. And
Exactly.
yeah, I'm curious about your comment. You were in groups and you would hear someone start sharing the details of their psychosis, and the leader, the therapist, would shut them down. What's the thought behind that? Because I'm not a clinician. What were they trying to do? Why do they think that's good?
I think they're afraid that other people are going to look down on the person, so they think they're protected. I used to do this when I was first out of college and working in a small mental health unit running groups. I would think everybody's going to think ill of them. I would think that it's going to bring too much trauma. It's going to trigger people. It's going to be too upsetting for people. They're not going to be able to handle it. When what really was that I was the one who was uncomfortable, and that my gauge. Some people might have been might get a little bit uncomfortable, but if there's enough people in there who are agreeing to be there for the purpose of telling their psychosis story, you don't have to be uncomfortable. If people agree to do that, and it is such a helpful experience, I think, to unveil what you're thinking and what happened to you and what you went through. and people won't tell you. I mean, people won't tell you no. They'll tell you this is what happened to me, and then there's always differences, and then that's where the natural tendency to reconsider what happened to you and how you can make meaning of it in new ways that give you new opportunities comes up.
Mhm. Well, it sounds like a wise approach. I like that. As someone who's done plenty of therapy. um, so at one point in the book, you're underemployed, you're staying with family, and you're really struggling. And you write in the book, all I want in life is my own place, a little job, and a dog, which, by the way, is exactly what I have. Although I love my job, I wouldn't call it little. Um, but that I thought, oh, why am I not happier? He's right. But today you have all that and then some. You've got your book published, your own practice, you're married. Do you feel satisfied? Tell us what's next.
Well, I think when I said that, I was wanting things that I just didn't feel like I could get. I was longing and wanting something that just I couldn't get, and it was just out of my capacity at that time. And I still have things that I want that feel like they're a little outside of my capacity, and some of those things go back to things that I feel weren't seen in me when I was younger, and a lot of that has to do with my writing, and uh, I really want to be read more frequently, and I just didn't. When I published the book, I didn't have many people read it, and a lot of people who read it wouldn't make comments or wouldn't write me a review or even would say things that shamed me a little bit and make comments that shamed me, and that was that was a lot of work to end up feeling that way. It was a hard experience. So I'd like to be more read, and I'd like to right now on my website I'm trying to have a workshop series that explores the definition of psychosis and teaches people a different way to think about it and the solutions that can come from thinking about it in a different way. And it kind of justifies a lot of interventions, and it's something that I really believe in. I've tested over the years. I've been writing it about 12 years now. So I'm hoping to get people to go to my website and sign up and be able to do one of these and explore what the meaning of psychosis is for people. And that would be a step that would help, I think. That's my next real project I'm trying to promote.
Yeah, and I think you may have answered this in some of your comments, but I'll toss it out in case you'd like to add on. In the book, you share many experiences of being talked down to by family members, by other folks. How do you work against stigma today?
I think I tell my story. I'm out, and I tolerate. One of the things I tell people is that you have to accept stigma to be able to work around it. If you don't accept it, you can't overcome. It's harder to overcome it. So I kind of operate from the fact that I need to accept that it exists instead of just letting it burn me, and then do things to combat it. And uh, there's some studies on stigma that say that contact stigma, having contact with somebody and just letting them know you're a person and making friends with them and then revealing your mental health challenges is the best way to having a successful change in the person's views of what mental health struggles are. And I think I've had to use that in my career to stay employed, where that I was silent for a while, and then I kind of came out. And then I had to deal with stuff when I came out. It was very challenging. And I had to keep on persisting and keep on going. And I think that's how I deal with stigma now. Is I'm still here, I'm still working. It's just a flesh wound. Let's go for the next thing. But it's hard. It's not easy.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it takes a lot of perseverance to just keep walking towards the goal when you have a mental health challenge. It just takes a lot of stamina. So
Yeah,
more
it's a
power.
long project.
Absolutely. Okay. What did you find helpful and unhelpful coming from loved ones?
I think when my loved ones credited what I did and supported what I was doing, and they also let me choose to some extent what I did, to some extent. But I think when it was something that I said I could do and I wanted to do it, and then you know, there were things that felt unsupportive along the way. But when it came down to it, when I had one of those times where I was just calling on the phone saying, I can't do it anymore, I want to give up, I just can't. They said, the money you're making really is important. We wouldn't be able to help you otherwise. You need to stick with it. That kind of stuff really helped. And and valuing the work that I did, dignifying it and saying that it was important work. Um, there was something else I had in mind. Maybe it'll come up later.
Yeah,
Um,
and for clarity, your loved ones were saying, we're helping you financially a little bit, but your income is really important to this equation too. Was I hearing that correctly?
yeah, yes, yes. And yeah, I'm still searching for that other point, but it's kind of, maybe it's not meant to be there right now. Sorry.
It may resurface and that will be fine. So,
Okay.
um, what do you say to someone who's clearly struggling with their mental health, psychosis or whatever, but will not get into treatment?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to really look at what they're doing already that's positive, and supporting that. And if staying out of treatment is what they want to do, help them stay out of treatment. I mean, treatment is not good for everybody all the time. It depends on what. I think a lot of times when people resist, it's because of their comments or in their feelings about the treatment is not being good for them, like being locked in a state hospital on a back ward where there's ice on the inside of the windows and they keep it below freezing on a regular basis is not like the kind of treatment I wanted to get. And when I wouldn't go to treatment, it was because I wanted to tell that story. I wanted to complain about that story, and yet nobody wanted to hear it. They wanted to hear more of the standard things, which was that I got into drugs, or I had schizophrenia, or that none of that was. I didn't think any of that was true. You know,
So
definitely.
they wanted compliance, basically.
Yeah, they just wanted blind compliance, and you have to do that. But yeah, yeah, I think working them with what they are doing, and supporting them in what they're doing, and telling my story is a major tool that I use. If people listen to my story, then they feel more free to tell their story. So.
Well, you're getting a lot of positive comments in the chat box. There are definitely reasons people don't want to be in treatment. And should we ask why? That's fair. I guess I think of myself when I write that question, I think of myself who avoided treatment and it did help me. But I know there are plenty of people. I think it was before we officially started at 7 that I was telling you, Tim. Yeah, I did St. John's Wort. I meditated. I tried yoga. I joined Toastmasters. I would not I did not want treatment, especially meds, but that was what I needed. But I do understand completely that some people get forced into treatment and then they don't want it, then they have an aversion for a very solid reason or whatever their experience is. I believe there are many paths to recovery, and I'm here to honor all of them. If they're healthy and they work for you, then I love it. Okay.
That's great. Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely. Comments from Nadia. She loves your writing. She said earlier, definitely avoiding treatment saved her life, but I did need some intervention at first. So thank you for sharing that. And from Facebook, a comment: it is hard to understand why a therapist would not want you to talk about delusions, since I usually think talking things out clarifies them. Good points. Fascinating comment on stigma. I think I've covered all the salient chat box points. Thanks for participating, folks who are putting your comments in the chat box. We always love to see them. What else have we got for Tim here? What gives you hope?
What gives me hope? Seeing my dog play gives me hope. My dog has a separation anxiety, and she struggles a lot with it. But when she plays and she has a good time, it really warms me up, makes me smile, makes me laugh. It gives me a great break, which I need sometimes. I think yeah, when I see somebody when I see somebody else build hope, when I hold hope for other people and I see them grow, that helps me have hope. Um, my story helps me have hope. Because I didn't think I'd be where I am at now. I really didn't think that would happen, and the fact that I am, there's still more to go. There's still, life isn't perfect. Life is challenging still, but when I see progress, it makes me feel. I do really wish that a lot more people that I work with could experience some of the empowerment that it has to be a staff person, and that's why I really like peer support. That when people work as counselors, it really helps them, empowers them, and it helps them work through their own stuff too. And I think that's really powerful. So.
Actually, there's a comment in your blog that I've read maybe a couple times that it takes 10 years to be a good therapist, good clinician, and that there's a process of going from maybe being part of the problem actually to really lifting people up. Could you say more about that?
Well, I think when I first got into mental health, I kept my own mental health under wraps, and I was off the table, and I was there for other people, and I was there just as somebody who had graduated school and was able to be successful enough to get this job. And that's not I I I guess I found that I was much more needed or wanted when I was more open about who I was, and when I was open about my own struggles. And I remember when I first had a therapist, he would disclose some things about himself, but he always sounded so good and like he was so normal and so, and so not who I was. And it didn't really touch me, and it just made me feel worse about myself. So, I like to share things that aren't glamorous about what I'm like, I'm okay with that. And yeah. Yeah.
I do think the big strength of peer support is having that feeling of a level playing field, and that
level.
Yeah, that I struggled with the feeling of a power imbalance with therapy for a long time.
Totally. And I think you can easily get beyond that, but it takes somebody who's willing to be open with you and vulnerable too.
Mhm. Yeah, which I now found. Interesting question from the chat box. Could you talk some about your experiences with the Dartmouth IPS model? And could you explain what that is also?
Oh yeah. Um, it is a best practice where basically the idea they brought it into our county, and they bring it into different counties. The idea is you get somebody a job and you get them support, and you let them work it, and if they something they want to do, and then if they fail, you get them another job, and if they fail, you get them another job, and if they fail, you get them another job until they stop failing. And the idea is that that's a good way to improve your mental health struggles. So obviously, when I talked about how important work was to me and how I built those social skills that I needed through work, that is an example of how somebody can really get better from a mental health struggle. And I think this idea that you have to be better before you work is um, not always the best. Wasn't the best for me, at least, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would have waited a while if I had just waited till I felt really ready and really perfect to work. So
Yeah, you kind of got to
definitely.
jump in there. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to now transition to the interview portion, away from the interview portion of the show and into our video of the week. First of all, I'd like to give a big shout out to those working behind the scenes, our mental health intern, Patience Greg, for helping out on the chat box and putting all those groovy resources there. Psychiatric nurse Gail Pruitt, who's doing the same and helping out on chat and Facebook. Executive Director Gary Kreitz for always being there. And of course, I want to thank Tim for spending your time with us today. I was going to say evening,
Thank
but you're
you.
on the West Coast, so this is not your evening yet.
Not quite, but thank you so much. It's my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So Tim provided some dog images. We're big on dog images. This is the part where we take a breath and lighten things up a little bit. This is Tim with Rosie, aka Maxine, the dog that's mentioned in the book. So if you're like me and you of course wanted to see the dog who's in the book, there she is. Do you want to say anything about that, Tim?
Rosie was so I don't know. I don't know if I would have got through without Rosie. Rosie was such a great dog. Yeah.
She's got a lovely smile in that image. And here we go. We've got a video of your current dog. And I'll show this and you can, Jayla.
Jayla. Yeah.
Hey, okay. Here we go. I love this. All right, how adorable is that? It was short, so I had to loop it at least once. And I love the water sound, so soothing, you know, got to hear those waves.
Thanks.
All right, so now it's time to answer questions from you, our virtual studio audience. I'm so glad you're here with us. If you're newer to Zoom, you may be wondering, how do I ask a question? You simply want to click on the Q&A box on the bottom, sort of towards the left of your screen, and we will do our best to answer all of your questions. Do you find writing emotionally exhausting or emotionally exhilarating, or both? There was also a comment, please speak up, but I've been able to hear you. I'm not sure.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll project. Yes, writing is both. It can be exhausting sometimes. It can be exhilarating at times. It's a practice. I do it regularly, and I have faith that something will come from it. So that's, I find it both. Yeah, it's a good question.
Oh, a question from Kate Ertl in Ohio. Thanks so much for being here, Kate. I love seeing your name there. She's one of my NAMI friends from Ohio. I think she's in Florida now, though. I'll just tell your life story before I read your question, Kate. What suggestions can you offer to help an individual in long-term recovery that explains to a new therapist, but the therapist does not seem to understand the severity of their needs, even though the peer has clearly explained? So how do you tell your story to a therapist when you've gotten to the point where you present well, is kind of how I'm reading that, and the therapist doesn't seem to get that you're struggling?
It's a hard question. When the therapist doesn't get that you're struggling, it sounds like they're not really validating you and not really hearing you and seeing you. And that's something the therapist really needs to work on. I think it sounds like, how do you get the therapist to see you? Maybe try a different therapist, or learn to shop around a little bit. For me, therapy was always so expensive and hard to imagine, but there are therapists who see people on insurance panels, and that it can be an affordable experience. And it is hard to find a therapist, but shop around, it's worth it. For the therapist too, they want to work with somebody who they're helping, not who they're not hearing. And yeah, a therapist needs to hear you.
I would say from personal experience, when I showed them my poetry, they seemed to have a whole different view of how I was feeling, which isn't really what I wanted at the time, but something to give some thought to if you're having that challenge. Next question, how do you manage psychotic thoughts when you work? What are the strategies you employ?
I try to stay focused on what I got to get done, mindful in the moment, not perseverating on them. They do come up, but when I have to produce something and have something there, it's a good way to distract from, and I'll probably think about it later, but it's a good way to distract, and there's something tangible that you have to get done. So yeah, seems to help.
Maybe that's the beauty of work, is that it just kind of pushes us.
Gets you in the zone a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that question. Did you ever think about doing YouTube videos? I think you do well there.
Thank you.
That's from Nadia.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm way too afraid to do YouTube videos. Yeah. Wow, that's a really nice compliment. I appreciate that.
All right, so we've gone through the first round of questions. We have plenty of time if you have more questions or comments or good jokes for Tim and I. And oh, nice comments about the video. Adorable and cute pup. I love the chat box. I always felt like a kind of other feeling from the fact that therapists could not relate to my experiences. Okay. That goes back to our comment, I think, on therapy versus peer support. I'm going to make a few quick announcements, and if you have more questions, please ask them. We do go with the energy of the group and the energy of the conversation, so we can wind down closer to 8 if that feels better than 8:30. Next week, we're having speakers about COVID and mental health. There are folks who live with mental health challenges who have recovered from COVID. How did it affect their mental health? Please join us to find out. We've got some really good speakers. Also, when you leave this awesome program, you'll see a survey. It will appear on your screen. Please answer the survey. That helps us show our grant funders the value of what we do. And we want to know what your thoughts are. How can we do our job better? So please help us with that. And another question has popped up. Do you ever have a discussion with your delusions or talk back to them?
Yes, especially in groups. I think, well, a great example is I've had friends that also have messages who have triggered me or made me think conspiracies, and I've just gone with them, and I've just trusted and learned from them, and they've helped me come to terms with some of the things I was fighting so hard when I was in the Italian deli. Like, I had one tell me the origins of the mafia and what they were really about, and explain, he did such powerful work with me that it helped me be more at peace with all that had transpired with me. And, he was somebody who was struggling himself. So, you really don't know who's going to be the one that helps you,
So this was a peer who you had conversations about your delusions with. Is that?
Yes, he'd heard me in group, and we went on some hikes. And in the hikes, he kind of addressed some of my delusions and opened my mind up a little bit. And it was just really welcomed, and it really helped me enormously, helped me understand things. And I think I might have helped him a little bit too. I sure hope I did. I think we had a really cool exchange.
Well, thank you for that. Next question. How has the way you interact in close relationships been impacted by the illness?
Well, that was, I don't have that many close relationships. My core relationships is my relationship with my wife, and my wife was very honest about herself, and then I had to kind of open up and let her know about myself, and then her therapist told her to break up with me, and we kind of worked through that and didn't break up. And it's been a really strong and powerful relationship for me, and it's been really helpful. I don't have tons of really close relationships. That's one thing I've got to work on. My dog.
Yeah, yeah, I love the story of her therapist telling her to break up with you, and the two of you deciding, oh, not so much. So this person missed the beginning of the show. Tim, could you please describe what your current profession is?
I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a small private practice, and I work at an outpatient unit where I've worked for about 18 years. Yeah.
And Tim is also an award-winning author of the book that's in the title of the show.
Right. Fighting for freedom in America.
That's right. Right on. And what types of diagnosis would benefit from the Dartmouth IPS model? Are there some severity of certain diagnoses that are not amenable to that model?
I think that the model is really open, in my understanding, to everybody having a chance to do that. They don't believe in sheltered workshops. They believe in competitive work. And there are people who can hold jobs who are hearing voices and having, I remember when I was working at the deli, there was somebody who was biking the opposite way every day, who was going to work at Target up where I lived. And I would see him, and I would see him talking to himself, and I would be like, I don't want anything to do with that person. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like him, you know? And at the same time, I would think, you know, this is so hard. I don't have anybody to be with me to get through this. And at least if I was an immigrant or something like that, I might have other people I could get support from. But I had the support right there. I just didn't use it. It was just really my own biases were so high. I had to really work on myself, you know.
It's a
And
hard thing.
that comes from I think the lessons I got what schizophrenia meant to me. And I think that was just a wrong concept. Yeah.
Um, are you open to new clients from Pam Swan?
I have a waiting list. I'm kind of jammed up. I'd love to open up another day, but I need health insurance. But I will take people on the waiting list. Yes. I hate that. I wish I could just be open. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Tim? Be sure to throw them up here. Had some really good conversations. I noticed a notice on your website about special messages. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. Special messages is a way of redefining what psychosis is. And special messages is there's many styles of special messages. Some can be interpersonal. Some can be codes and words. Some can be sensing the thoughts of somebody else. Like if you've ever been close to somebody and you know, so that you kind of know what they're thinking. Um, um, some can be voices. Uh, Others are intuitions, like if you just get a gut intuition. But all these things are things that might have another story attached to them, and they might be right and they might be wrong, but you have to kind of read between the lines to get the narrative. The things you're not sure about that make that there's some license in how you interpret them. And when you get in a message crisis, you're inundated with you see messages in everything, and you make meaning of things with everything. And it gets to be you can learn a lot, but it gets to be to where you can't get other things done, and that's where you have to kind of learn to balance that and also get other things done, I think.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I can definitely relate to the intuition that having a friend preoccupy my mind and then they call, or that feeling that,
Yeah, serendipities, yes.
yeah, yeah, just those moments. Um, from Nadia, do you have any hobbies?
Hiking and writing, and yeah, that's mostly it. I do a lot of both of them.
I wonder if you put together all the miles you hiked in the book, how many it would be. I think it was probably like 1,000.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I do a
That's
lot
good.
of hiking.
It sounds, well, from the book, it's seemed therapeutic to you, just the nature connection.
Yes. You know, one of the things I'm studying now is EMDR. I'm trained so I can use it, but I think that there's a real similarity between the eye movements and the bilateral stimulation you get when you walk. And when I walk, I have things come up for me, and I get answers for things, and I just feel much better. It's just it's like meditation, and it's healthy for me. It's a really good outlet, and my dog likes it too. So does my
That is
wife.
really interesting, that EMDR, which um, you could probably explain it better. It's eye movement desensitization and reintegration. I always get something wrong.
Um, re, um,
Processing,
wait, reprocessing. Yes, reprocessing. Yes.
but it's maybe tapping or looking at a light,
Yes.
going back and forth.
you go back into trauma, and then you reprocess, you get the feelings in your body, and then you do the reprocessing, and you think about the trauma maybe with your adult mind present, and you kind of make sense of it in some new ways, and some positive ways, and some ways you can really believe in and that can heal you from that trauma, and make you realize it's not always there. So you can compartmentalize it and hold it down. Yeah.
Right. So that's EMDR for those who are interested. It's a very helpful tool for dealing with trauma. And another question, I may have missed this, but could you summarize how you define psychosis?
Great. I think there's 8 components, and some of them are internal and some of them are external. One of them is special messages. Another is the process of what I call sleuthing, which means making meaning of messages that are out there and trying to connect the dots. Divergent views are ideas about the world that are a little off of mainstream, that might be more correct than what most people think, but also could lead to errors. Then there is theories or frameworks, and frameworks are where do these things come from? What's causing them? Is it trauma? Is it political? Is it spiritual? Is it scientific? Is it psychological? All these different explanations can explain them. Also, there's the phenomenon of tricksters. Tricksters are messages you get that you believe are true, and then they become true. And the thing about a trickster is that a trickster can cheat you out of your value and your worth. And if you go against the trickster and pray that the trickster doesn't come true, it may not come true. So it's a way of working towards what you want to have happen, and having faith in spirituality that you can kind of overcome. It's positive psychology in a nutshell. Then there is social sanctions. There's retaliation reactions, which is, I'm losing count on my fingers. But retaliation reactions is when you act as though the messages are true, and then you face social sanctions, which is punishments. And then there's stigma. So all of these things, I think, need to be part of understanding of what psychosis is. It's not just 3 things.
That is fascinating. I love that. I will have to read more of your website or take your class or something. I think that's fascinating. I've never heard it put that way, but I think all those components are really important, especially the external, the stigma, the social sanctions, because all of that, delusions can be oppressive, hallucinations can be oppressive, but stigma is horrible.
Yeah,
so
it's irrational, and a lot of times they want to teach us cognitive skills, so we're a lot less rational. But if they learn them about the understanding of psychosis more, and they had a more rational understanding of psychosis and had higher hopes for us, it might really help both of us, you know.
Yeah, there's a note from our psychiatric nurse, Gail, that, let's see, I can't see the whole message, so I'm trying to scroll it. As a psychiatric nurse, we are taught so many things that I do not think are helpful for people with psychosis and other mental illnesses. I so agree with your approach, Tim. Thank you for validating what I have long believed, which is to address the thoughts, delusions, images when appropriate for you, and learn to put them on hold when it is not. For example, when you're working. Thank you for that, Gail. That's a good insight.
Thank you.
So another question in the box, could the special message section on your website be used by others to place their thoughts on it and then leave it there and focus on something else? I'm not sure I understand that one.
But well, you can leave comments on my blogs, and some of the blogs describe what special messages are a little bit more. So and yeah, so there is an ability to give me feedback. I love to hear feedback.
Yeah, and this person might be asking, can I write my special message there, maybe to get it off my chest, kind of thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to get it out. You got to when you put words to it, you help you help give it a chance to pass by in the sky, like in mindfulness, you know. If you can't put words to it, and you can't say it, and you've got to hold it all inside, it sticks and burns a lot more. Yeah.
Good. So apparently that was the question, and thank you so much. I think that's a wonderful service for people, to take the demon and put it into words, make structure out of chaos. And Tim Dreby is willing to have that on his site, and that will help you find some peace. So that's a wonderful thing. All right, thank you for that question. That's a great idea, very creative. Okay. We're running low on questions again. So once again, I'm going to thank all the folks working behind the scenes, Gail, Patience, Gary Kreitz, and of course, Tim, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your story and your wisdom with us. It's been a very interesting conversation. One of the people wrote in the chat box, I love this guy. So I think it's going well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to note, when you disagree with someone on Facebook, you never know what good things could come. You might make an awesome friend like Tim Dreby.
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. So do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to say before we wrap up?
I just want to thank everybody for listening, and I don't often get to talk about my book and my experiences, and I feel so lucky to be able to do so. And I really thank everybody for taking the time to come to the webinar and consider my story and other people's stories, and I'm just really grateful. Feel a lot of gratitude right now.
All right. Well, that feeling is shared. And so we're going to start wrapping up. A reminder, please come back and visit us to meet the peers who have survived COVID-19 and learn how it affected their mental health, how they're coping with the aftermath. If you can fill out our surveys, that helps us out so very much. Let people know the value of what we do here at Thursdays with NAMI, building conversations and community around mental health, very inclusive, accepting atmosphere here. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope to see you back again in the future. Please be well in the week ahead. Observe social distancing, be safe with yourself. Go where you need to go. Do what you need to do to remain safe. And I'll put myself in California.
Ah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks, Tim. It was so nice. I hope we talk again sometime.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.